Welcome, One Crack News. They're getting everything together now. You know how the dips are. Dip, 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 dip. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe right here. Getting it in early, never late. All the votes are going in, buddy. Vote, vote, vote. Yays and nays. Uh-oh, here come them votes swinging around. Get some, get some. All right, we're going to get this thing sped up. Man, the Republicans only had two people say no. Democratic had all 214 say no. Not one Democrat agreed to this resolution. 215 Republicans said yes, 214 of the Democrats, all of them said no. Damn. Not one of them. It was two Republicans that didn't agree with the other party. They said, the hell with that. We are not in agreement. Mm. Okay. Yeah, they still getting votes together. Well, we'll see how far it goes. The Democrats have always been the unorganized, the uneasy.
Personally involved himself in a criminal investigation tied to an election he lost. It is inappropriate for the president to advocate for actions that are wholly at odds with the Constitution and 2.5 centuries of state and local elections. It is inappropriate for the Director of National Intelligence to insert herself into a domestic law enforcement operation
Talk to him.
far outside her statutory role.
Talk to him.
And it is profoundly inappropriate for either of them to blur the lines between intelligence, law enforcement, and partisan politics. But that is exactly what happened last week in Fulton County. As Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I want to underscore a core legal boundary. U.S. intelligence agencies are structured to operate overseas, not on domestic soil. The National Security Act and other laws exist precisely to prevent election officials or intelligence officials from surveilling or intervening in domestic political matters. I may be the only one, well, maybe somebody else is old enough to remember that a lot of this came about because of actions of the Nixon administration back in the 60s. Those actions that literally resulted in the creation of the Oversight Committee that I now sit as chair and now vice chair. Because we know when intelligence personnel are inserted into domestic criminal investigation, especially one launched under such a thin veil of legitimacy, it raises serious legal and constitutional questions and politicizes an institution that must remain neutral and apolitical. The Director of National Intelligence does not conduct criminal investigations. She has no role in executing search warrants, and she does not belong on the scene of a domestic FBI search, particularly one tied to the president's personal grievances carried out under the pretense of normal law enforcement. Now, Director Gabbard argues that her presence was justified by, quote, broad statutory authority. But broad authority to analyze intelligence is not a license to participate in a sham investigation. And it certainly does not justify facilitating direct contact between the frontline FBI agents doing this investigation directly to the President of the United States. That phone call alone should concern every American because it didn't occur in a vacuum. Now, if this administration were genuinely committed to election security, its actions would reflect that. Instead, we have seen the absolute opposite, the systemic weakening of the very institutions designed to protect our elections from real threats. And remarkably, many of these organizations and entities were put in place under the first Trump administration. So what have they done? The administration disbanded the FBI's Foreign Intelligence Task Force, the unit created in 2017 to investigate foreign interference, share intelligence across agencies, and work with the private sector to close cyber vulnerabilities. It has gutted enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, which exists to expose covert foreign influence in our political system. It dismantled the Office of the Director of National Intelligence's own Foreign Malign Influence Center, a center created by law. This is not an option for Tulsi Gabbard to dismiss. This center was created by law to track and document state-sponsored threats to our elections and candidates, and do so with transparency designed to make sure politics stays out of its work. And it has slashed the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA's, election security workforce, cutting more than a third of the agency and ending funding for programs that provided direct cybersecurity support to state and local elections. These are not the actions of an administration that's serious about election security. These are the actions of an administration clearing away safeguards while simultaneously inserting itself into domestic investigations, seizing election materials as they did in Georgia, and publicly calling for Republicans, again, to take over and nationalize voting in multiple states. When you put all of this together, it is clear that what happened in Fulton County is not about revisiting the past. It is about shaping the outcome of future elections. And quite honestly, dismantling the very guardrails that were put in place to keep them free and fair. This is why it cannot be brushed aside with carefully worded letters from Director Gabbard. She owes Congress, and more important, the American people, direct answers. So once again, I'm calling on the Director of National Intelligence to appear in person before the Senate Intelligence Committee to testify under oath about her role in this matter. She needs to explain why she believed it was appropriate to involve herself in a domestic criminal investigation, why she facilitated direct contact between the president and FBI agents on the ground, and what safeguards, if any, were put in place to protect against direct political interference. Now, we all know that Americans deserve free elections, safe from political intimidation. They deserve a justice system that operates independently. And they deserve accountability when those very safeguards are put at risk. And as Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I'm going to use every tool I can to make sure that we get those answers. And before I take questions, I remember back, a year ago at this time, when people would often ask me when they were seeing the actions of the Trump administration, do you think we'll have free and fair elections in 26 or in 28? And my response at that point was, I think you're overreacting. I have deep concerns about the fairness of our elections in 26 and 28 right now. I have concerns about the elections in primaries in our country. I have concerns about the elections that may take place in Virginia in terms of a redistricting referendum. These kind of actions that have taken place over the last year, as we've seen this systemic dismantling of the very protections that were put in place by, again, the first Trump administration. If it doesn't scare the heck out of you, it should. And then, if you go back to the report, the Bipartisan Intelligence Committee investigation report into the 2016 interference, unanimously agreed to by including the Secretary of State and all of the members of the committee. It said one of the strongest protections we had about interference in our election system was the fact of our decentralization, that we have these elections carried out as laid out in the Constitution by states and localities. The idea that now Donald Trump wants to nationalize these elections and have one political party take over that process, this provides a huge danger to our country going forward and the safety and security of these elections. So I'll be happy to take your questions.
Senator, given the president's comments on the podcast and the events in Georgia, have you heard about this effort spreading to other states? Are you concerned?
I'm deeply concerned about it spreading to other states.
Have you heard?
I have not heard to date. Remember, the indictment, or in this case, the affidavit that was sworn, hasn't been released. In prior administrations, when there was evidence of potential malfeasance, it was released. I think when the Biden administration went after some of the influencers who were being paid by Russian sources, that was all the underlying documents were released. Why has this one not been released? Why was the FBI agent in charge of the Atlanta office moved aside? Why, in a normal course of an investigation like this, the effort would be led by the U.S. attorney from the state, Georgia? Why was?
Am I going to talk while the guy's talking?
I think we're seeing here a president obsessed about the fact that he lost in 2020. He can't get over it. And it appears, and if there is some foreign connection here, the Director of National Intelligence has clearly violated her duty to keep the intelligence committees informed, which she has not. I think this is an effort to try to curry favor back with the president in an area where she's clearly been excluded from most of the recent national events, including Venezuela, Iran, situation with NATO and elsewhere. I have no other logical explanation until and unless she comes forward and testifies. Please.
Thank you, Senator. Just as someone who's much more familiar than most with the ins and outs of the role of Director of National Intelligence, does Tulsi Gabbard have the time to be doing election probes in Georgia? Is that not a very busy job?
Well, let me answer it two ways. First of all, the FBI that's been over a month late on getting out the Epstein files, were they taking people off of getting that information out to put them on this investigation that seems like it's a thinly veiled attempt to kind of appease the president? And no, the Director of National Intelligence under Biden, under Trump 1, under Obama, That's a full-time job plus. Running off on her own, and it's been reported to me that the FBI was not aware she was coming. She's got this much extra time. Well, I don't know what she's doing in the job. And it goes back to, at least until I'm corrected. Otherwise, the assumption, since she's not been involved in any of the briefs on Iran, on Venezuela, on the circumstance with Greenland and NATO, or any of the other national security concerns where our intelligence community plays a critical role, most of those have been briefed by the Secretary of State or by John Ratcliffe. I'm not sure what she's doing. Please.
Now, you said, I think, that you have not received any notification from the DNI about protecting foreign interference in election infrastructure, which is required under the law to report within 14 days.
I guess I should be talking now while he's not talking. Is that the point? I was listening to him.
Have you, and do you know if there's a connection between what she did in Georgia and this whistleblower?
Well, let me try to answer that in 2 ways. One, in terms of, I read the intelligence briefs on a regular basis, and I've got a full staff that follows this. If there had been something percolating about foreign influence in the 26 elections, I sure as hell should have seen it. And I've not seen it. And you're right. If it was there, she had an obligation to report it to us. And I would point out again, during Trump 1, during Biden, there were regular updates from the DNI and the whole law enforcement intelligence apparatus to make sure that we could reassure Americans that the elections were going to be safe. We've had none of that. If anything, we've had the exact opposite, is they've broken down all the institutions put in place. On the second question of the whistleblower, I'm going to see that complaint imminently. I have not received it. But I think it is literally today or tomorrow. But let's go back and look at this for a second. It took the Gang of 8 6 months of negotiation with the Director of National Intelligence to share that whistleblower complaint. This is in direct contradiction to what Gabbard testified during her confirmation hearings, that she would protect whistleblowers and share the information in a timely manner. It took 6 months of bipartisan pressure to get them to bring it forward. The notion of the Gang of 8 was created so that you could have this kind of communication in a completely secure manner. And I do not, again, I'll take a look at the complaint, but the idea that she held back for 6 months a bipartisan request from the Gang of 8 is one more example of somebody that's in way over her head in this job.
Is there any sort of evidence from the IC or expectation from the IC that we'll see Russia, China, or Iran try to interfere in the elections this fall? And at this point, I mean, is your concern greater? What's your greater concern? Is it foreign interference or is it domestic?
Well, let me try to. The National Intelligence report, or when we did worldwide threats last year, the document that comes out with that still included. This was the Trump administration, their last major report on this, still included. We are concerned about, election threats from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and potentially others. And with AI tools, the threats grow more complicated all the time. It makes what happened in 2016 look like child's play. But right now, I'm more concerned about domestic interference. I'm concerned about a president that hasn't read the Constitution. I'm concerned about efforts to intimidate voters, whether it be ICE roving patrols, or whether it be these kind of claims that are brought. I'm concerned about the fact that I think in many states, I've seen upwards of 50% of the election officials, who are all nonpartisan, have quit or retired, mostly because of some of the threats, online threats and threats and doxing that's taken place. So yeah, I'm very concerned about domestic interference as well as foreign interference. And the ability then for a foreign entity to amplify these divisions or spread lies, that is, that's much easier now. Remember in 2016, Russia had to create fake identities to say crazy stuff and then amplify it. You don't need to create fake identities now. You can simply promote some of the theories that come out of folks in this administration. Please.
A few questions. One to clarify, what setting will the whistleblower complaint be made available in? Will that be brief? Will that just be made available to the Gang of Eight?
I believe it is only the Gang of Eight, and I don't know the setting yet, but we'll have information on that over the next 30 seconds.
Further detail on the extent of the DNI's involvement in this investigation, just what's been said publicly, or to what extent actually the IC is now involved in this investigation?
We had no indication. I'm not sure we've had any of the letters we've actually even written the DNI ever responded to over the last year. There may be one or two. So, but I can tell you this much, that our contacts within the FBI said they were as surprised as anybody her showing up and skulking around. Go back to what I said. The DNI has no domestic criminal investigation responsibilities. Her job is to look at foreign interference in our elections. And this whole effort is the opposite of transparent. Here and there.
On that point exactly, there seems to be a wide discrepancy between what you're describing and what Director Ratcliffe described in her letter for the mandate of foreign and domestic involvement in election security. Could you explain more for people who follow this very closely why it is that it's only foreign concerns that fall under
it goes back to the laws that created the whole intelligence oversight structure. It goes back to the National Security Act that was passed after President Nixon. It goes back to entities that were at least connected with the intelligence community involved in this little breakout called Watergate. And there was the whole notion that we need to make clear that our intelligence operations are outward looking, and America don't need to worry about those agencies looking at them. It's one of the components we go through regularly when we debate Section 702. It is the job of the FBI to look into that. And for her to show up, and the hypocrisy of her showing up, after this administration has done more to dismantle the election protections put in place, the FBI's Foreign Malign Influence Center, the law that was passed, I believe in 2019, that created in the Office of Director of National Intelligence a Foreign Malign Influence Center. You're concerned about election security, you would beef that up. You wouldn't dismantle it. The number of folks that have been let go from CISA, in terms of cybersecurity protections. They work again, the fact that the 2020 election came off cleanly because many of the things that were put in place obviously cost Chris Krebs his job when he was head of CISA and said this was a clean election, but everything since that time has validated that. This seems again about Donald Trump's obsession. He lost in Georgia. He lost in 2020. The fact that he can't get that out of his head, and whether he is directing this investigation, it sure as heck appears that shouldn't he have more to do than talking to the FBI agents who are on the front line of serving a search warrant?
on this effort to nationalize elections. Have you heard anything indicate that it would be
It's not only would it not be appropriate, I believe it would be, to the extent almost of a constitutional violation. The Constitution is clear that elections are the gambit of the state and localities. And the irony here is that, and this is the hypocrisy of the moment, there were many states, every one of them Republican-led, that were concerned about when CISA tried to help put better cybersecurity protections in, it was called the Albert system. States were concerned all Republican-led, or localities Republican-led, say, oh my God, this would be letting the feds into our purview. So this is, again, Alice in Wonderland world, where up is down and down is up. The idea that you've got a Republican president saying, no, trust the feds on all this election. It is both against the Constitution and it's against the position of every Republican elected official from 20 through, I'd even say 2025. We'll see. I'm not sure many of them have yet responded. I'll be anxious to see whether any of them said, oh, no, we want to turn it all over to the feds.
Yeah, on that note, traditionally, Intel is one of the more bipartisan issues in this chamber. We know how often you work across the aisle and speak with your colleagues on the Republican side. Do they share your concerns?
So I think, I've talked to Senator Cotton. We have a good working relationship. I think, we are going to get Gabbard testify, I believe, within the next few weeks about the worldwide threats hearing, unless she pulls out the same way she was supposed to talk to the election officials last Friday and then abruptly pulled out. And I can assure you the history the Intelligence Committee had of working bipartisanly and to monitor election security is going to continue this year. Please.
Hi, sir. On the whistleblower complaint, do you have confidence in Inspector General Fox, who the Senate confirmed in October? He is supposed to be responsible for the process of delivering this complaint to Congress. Is that any concern that you have?
It greatly concerns me that it took 6 months of bipartisan pressure to get what I think was supposed to be, and Eric, help me on this, was supposed to be delivered within 14 days. How long is it before a complaint is supposed to be delivered?
14 days review, another 7.
Okay. So whether it's 21 days, we'll give it a month. But it took 6 months of bipartisan pressure to get the document that we should have seen months ago.
What finally changed, or when did that change that you now know?
I got notified just over the last few days, whether that was tied to the fact that my Republican colleagues agreed as well that what was happening in Georgia was so outrageous that you can't have this stonewalling coming from the administration. I got no answer. I don't have a direct answer on that.
What have you been, I mean, you've got huge questions about all of this, but if you could draw us through a scenario as to what her presence in Georgia, the president's comments yesterday about taking control of 15 states, his retweeting of foreign conspiracy theories last week, how you see this, how they might use all of that to affect the
Listen,
2026.
people have been talking, and this is where, again, a year ago, I thought it was kind of just speculation, but the idea that the president could use some event that would be allowed to send in an insurrection act. The idea that the president might send some part of the federal government, like ICE, into patrol, and suddenly people are saying, well, we want to make sure that nobody undocumented shows up at any polling station. Again, pre-Minneapolis occupation, that didn't ring as true as it potentially rings true right now. And the notional idea that since the president is obsessed about the fact that he won't accept the fact that he lost in 2020, the notional idea that he will, ask his loyalists to do something inappropriate beyond the Constitution scares the heck out of me. And I think it scares the heck out of most Americans because we're seeing the constraints move aside. And I come again back to the fact that I've raised this, repeatedly over the last number of months. Why would you dismantle the FBI center that appropriately looked at all of domestic and foreign threats to our elections? Why would you undo the legally created entity within the ODNI on foreign malign influence?
Create some fictitious foreign threat to the election?
The administrations that this might not tell the truth, I don't find that shocking at all. Anybody else? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This will not be the last word we'll have on this topic. Thank you.
Towers and facilities by 26% above fiscal year 2025. The bill also protects investments for continuing Amtrak service along the Northeast Corridor and National Network by providing $2.4 billion. And the bill also includes $100 million for the 2026 World Cup and $94 million for the 2028 Olympics to help transit agencies manage local transportation in support of games across the country. Madam Chair, this year's Transportation and Housing Bill will provide greater economic certainty to communities across the country and improve the day-to-day lives of everyday people. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Now yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished chairman of the Subcommittee on Defense of the Committee on Appropriations, the gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, and I want to thank my good friend from Oklahoma, Chairman Tom Cole, to a job well done. I rise today in strong support of the Senate amendment to H.R. 7148, which includes my bill, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act of fiscal year 2026. This legislation was a true bipartisan effort by all four corners of the Defense Appropriations Committee. The world is more dangerous than ever. China continues its rapid military expansion. Russia and Iran remain persistent threats. Illicit drugs continue to harm Americans here at home. This bill answers to that challenge. It provides $839.2 billion to strengthen deterrence, support the administration's America First defense agenda, and to modernize our force. It invests in next-generation aircraft, the nuclear triad, critical munitions, missile defense, naval power, funding 17 new ships, and sustaining fleet readiness. The bill also drives innovation and efficiency, delivers a 3.8% pay raise for our service members, strengthens counter-drug efforts, and invests in our defense industrial base and infrastructure. These are strategic investments to protect the American people, project strength abroad, and I urge all my colleagues to support this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Hawaii, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Case.
The gentleman from Hawaii is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this member as a member of the Appropriations Committee, as well as of our subcommittees on defense and on homeland security. Madam Speaker, I join the vast majority of Americans in condemning the actions of immigration and customs enforcement. Brutality and death in our streets, so-called leaders trashing victims and their grieving families, warrantless searches, fear in our own citizens, I had a state senator in my own district tell me this last week that she was fearful of going out to talk to her constituents in her district without her passport. This is unacceptable. This is un-American, and ICE must be reformed. And until it is, neither it nor its parent entity, the Department of Homeland Security, should be fully funded. And the best way for us to reform ICE is to keep our laser focus on ICE reform. And this measure does exactly that. It gives this administration and my majority colleagues 10 days to work with us all to do the right thing. And unless the right thing is done, we should not fund the Department of Homeland Security. But this measure also funds 70% of our federal government rather than shut it down again. And let me focus on just a few areas where this is critical. Let's start with defense, half of our total budget. In a time that it is critical to our national security that our Defense Department be fully operating, be fully focused, be nimble, be quick, the ability to adjust, and yet we have kept our Defense Department essentially crippled for 16 months now since the last time that we funded it in regular order and gave it direction through funding and oversight was fiscal year 2024. They've been operating on a continuing resolution for 16 months now, and that cripples national security. That is a national security risk. No new programs, procurement that is excessively expensive because it cannot function over multi-years, no effective system-wide modernization. Any military leader will tell you that the worst thing going for it right now, in a time when it has to adjust to the PRC, to Russia, across a variety of focuses, is now that it needs full flexibility. Financial services and general government, this bill funds the federal courts. Can we envision a time in our history when it was not more important that the federal courts be fully staffed and funding? I don't think so. This bill funds Social Security. It enables Social Security to continue to function for the millions of Americans who depend on it at a time when Social Security is being crippled by staff cuts. Foreign affairs. This bill provides continued security assistance to our friends and allies throughout the world. It maintains some effective projection of presence out there into the world. It funds the Countering PRC Influence Fund that is so important to us. Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, it funds the FAA so that our air transportation system can continue to fund. Federal workers overall, who have borne the brunt of our failure to appropriate in regular order millions throughout our country, it helps them by assuring them that they can continue without great doubt. We must pass this measure now, and it must not be, need not be.
I yield the gentleman an additional minute.
Additional minute.
It must not be, need not be, and will not be at the expense of ICE reform. We sacrifice none of that mandate to reform ICE by passing this bill today. I would finally say to our Department of Homeland Security employees out there who have served us so well through so much difficulty, to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Homeland Security Investigations, Customs and Border Protection, Transportation Security Administration, you do critical work for us. And we apologize to you that we must create uncertainty to you for the foreseeable future, but we ask you to understand that reforming ICE is critical not just to those that are suffering at the hands of ICE. It is critical to our country. You will be paid. You will be paid because this continues your pay. But the uncertainty, until we get this resolved, you must live with. We appreciate your cooperation. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend, my classmate, the co-chairman of the full committee and the chairman of the subcommittee on national security and related programs, distinguished gentleman from Florida, Mr. Diaz-Balart.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to Chairman Cole. Actually, I'm going to reserve what I'm going to say about Chairman Cole to the end, but also to the ranking member of the full committee, Congresswoman DeLauro, Congresswoman Frankel, the subcommittee ranking member. Look, this full year funding really refocuses our nation's foreign policy in historic ways. It focuses on U.S. national security, but it does so while also restoring fiscal sanity. In this area, in the foreign policy arena, it actually reduces spending by 16%. But within those really historic reductions, the bill does more to counter our adversaries like China, Iran, the cartels in our hemisphere, and to support our allies and friends. It does a lot more, but spending a lot less money. Madam Speaker, the bill increases funding to counter fentanyl. It increases support for religious freedom and to address religious persecution around the planet. It maintains our longstanding pro-life provisions. And this bill removes controversial funding directives like the UN climate change. It makes double-digit reductions to the UN funding, and it, more importantly, or equally as important, it gives the Secretary of State the tools and leverage to demand much-needed reforms. These are historic changes. And this approach, again, protects American taxpayer, but also the national security interests of the United States. Now, Madam Speaker, we would not be here debating this if it wasn't for the brilliant, persistent leadership of the full committee chairman. A lot of folks said that we would never get here, that we would end up with another long-term CR, which would have been so detrimental to our country. But I will tell you, it was Tom Cole, yes, with his partners, but Tom Cole who brought us this far, who are going to actually get these bills passed, send them to the president for his signature. Mr. Chairman, we owe you, the country owes you, a debt of gratitude. Thank you, sir. I yield back, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Florida yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized. The gentlewoman reserves.
I'm sorry.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
The gentleman from Guam is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my friend Chairman Cole for the great work you have done on the appropriations. And that is why I rise today in support of the measure before us. The Senate amendment preserves the 5 bipartisan funding bills that this chamber has agreed to while giving us the necessary time to come to an agreement on homeland security funding. We simply cannot allow our troops or federal employees to miss another paycheck. If we fail to send this bill to the president's desk today, this shutdown will continue to drag on and limit access to the programs that Americans across the country rely on for health care, for education, and national security. Now in Guam, where the enlistment rate is the highest in the nation, many of our families rely on a timely paycheck for everyday needs. This bill strengthens support for our service member and includes 3.8% pay raise for all military personnel and continues to pay rate increases for our junior enlisted service members. So I strongly agree and urge my colleagues to support this measure and to support the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the passage of this legislation will kick off a 10-day negotiation around an issue that is causing deep divisions throughout the country. I do believe we can come together around a set of reforms that will advance and focus the mission of Immigration and Customs Enforcement while protecting our officers and protecting the public. But such reforms must go hand in hand with a commitment to stop jurisdictions like Minnesota and California from releasing dangerous, wanted individuals as some sort of act of defiance, thereby forcing immigration authorities to go into communities rather than have an orderly transfer in a custodial setting. I want to read a quote on this topic. It reads as follows: "I do not consider it in the service of public safety to release an individual into the community when that individual can be released to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for prompt removal." That statement comes not from President Trump, not from Secretary Noem, but from Alejandro Mayorkas, President Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security.
Gentleman is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, if even Secretary Mayorkas can recognize the folly of these so-called sanctuary policies, then all of us on both sides of the aisle should be able to hear as well. I yield back.
Back. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
I would advise my friend I'm prepared to close whenever she is.
Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, gentleman. I just want to outline for a moment the impacts of the failure to pass the 5 bipartisan House-passed spending measures, what that would do. Military personnel, extended shutdown will harm both military and civilian personnel at DOD who could not legally receive pay during a shutdown. Federal courts will no longer have funding to sustain full paid operations, and the courts can only carry out limited functions. The community development financial institutions, if that lapses, the money will be withheld in funding for over almost 1,500 credit unions, banks, and community financial institutions. The SBA would be unable to approve $170 million per day in loan assistance. Social Security Administration, thousands of Social Security Administration employees would likely be furloughed, delays on the SSA's 800 number, limited hours of operation. The National Institutes of Health freeze funding for new research grants, including research, cancer, Alzheimer's, ALS, heart disease, diabetes, kidneys, mental health, maternal mortality, infectious disease, genetic diseases, and the list goes on and on and on. Community health centers would receive only partial funding to provide healthcare services for low-income patients. Head Start, if funding lapses, thousands of low-income children would be at risk of losing access to Head Start programs. Senior nutrition grants are at risk. That's Meals on Wheels as well as congregate meals. Worker protection agencies would likely furlough federal staff who are responsible for investigating wage theft, safety and health hazards in high-risk areas. That's just a small smattering of what the impact of the failure to pass these 5 bills, 5 bipartisan bills, where we had 341 yes votes in this chamber not 3 weeks ago. Now, some might say, well, what do you think about what ICE and the CBP are doing? I'm not unaware of that. I share the anger. I share the outrage of what they are done. And it is, yes, it's Minnesota, but it is also what's happening all over this country. People are being beat up. They're being pulled out of schools, pulled out of churches, and people frightened to death that they carry their passports with them. Their passports. And they're American citizens, and they're frightened. What have we proposed in this area? And that's when we were doing the appropriations bills. Prohibition on detaining or deporting U.S. citizens, reducing funding for ICE, prohibition on the use of Border Patrol and CBP officers, and a requirement for DHS law enforcement to use body-worn cameras, require reporting on the use of force. Training standards. They should be trained in de-escalation. And that's what ought to be happening in this, instead of fomenting escalation, requiring ICE warrants. And there are other things. And I might add, just so that the people on the committee here understand, in June of 2025, the House Appropriations Committee advanced the FY 2026 Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. It included bipartisan reforms and safeguards designed to protect U.S. citizens and vulnerable communities. However, when the bill was renegotiated in January 2026, these critical reforms were removed, but Democrats and Republicans voted for these reforms, and they must do it again. And the list goes on. No funds if DHS violates the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. No funds for detaining again and deporting U.S. citizens. No prohibition on video recording for ICE. This was all passed in an appropriations committee and then stripped out, The fact of the matter is, look, we need to focus like a laser in these 10 days, 6 legislative days on DHS. Let's not have to focus on 5 agencies where there is agreement on what we do. And there is agreement on our side of the aisle. Despite what the press may report, there is now a single Democrat in this body who believes what ICE and the CBP are doing is acceptable. And I cannot believe that a number of my Republican colleagues feel the same way. Let us focus in on the Department of Homeland Security. Let the public understand the nature of the fight. Quite honestly, let my Republican colleagues, let the administration defend the Department of Homeland Security and its lawlessness and recklessness when the majority of this country is seeing what they are doing. We all want the same thing. We want to keep our constituents safe. We want to stop the violence in the streets. We want to end chaos in our communities. And that these out-of-control agencies have created. The simple truth is we have a better chance of imposing real constraints on ICE and the CBP if this bill passes than if it fails. We have a better chance at securing justice for Renee Good and Alex Pretty and all of those people all over this country who have been harassed, who have been beaten, who've been taken out of their homes, 5-year-old children being detained. That's a reality. Nobody wants that. But we have a better chance of justice for these folks if this bill passes rather than if it fails. We have a better chance of putting an end to what has become a season of terror if this bill passes than if it fails. I'm asking my colleagues, understand the moment, meet the moment. We have an opportunity over these next several days to lay out the arguments against what the Department of Homeland Security and its leadership and what this administration has wrought on the American people. We serve in this body to be responsive to the American people. They are clamoring and they are crying out for help. We can help them with passing 5 bills that meets their needs. And we can help them by gaining control and focusing our ire and our anger over an agency that is run, in my view, by incompetence, by lies, and by terror. That is not who we are. Those are not the values of the American people. It is not the values of the people in this body. Everyone sees what is happening. And we can't let go of the gains that have been made that make a difference in people's lives, in the education of their kids, in their health, their safety, of looking at substance abuse and opioid addiction and how we can deal with that, transportation, rent assistance, homeless assistance, maternal mortality, childcare, Head Start. It is 2 paths that we face today. One, if we pass the bills, and what our opportunities are to make a difference and make changes in an agency so needed to be changed. And I do believe we all recognize that. And at the same time, to say to the American people, We understand the crisis of a cost of living that you have. And we are there to defend you and your family and to make life and make government work on your behalf. That is our responsibility. I view that as my responsibility as the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. This is the way our government functions. I thank you. Again, we have a better chance to end the season of terror. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, when you reach a point like this, there's a lot of people to thank. I want to begin by thanking the President of the United States. He supported each and every one of these tranches of bills that have been brought to the floor during this critical month where we completed the appropriations process. We would not be here today without him. We would probably not be voting on this bill without him. He was working today tirelessly to make sure we followed our own procedures and brought this bill to the floor. So I want to personally thank President Trump for his contribution to funding the government. People forget around here, he has to sign the bills. If he doesn't sign them, believe me, he can sustain any veto he cares to cast. He's used his influence and his power constructively to bring us together across partisan lines and to pass what are bipartisan, bicameral bills, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my own leadership. I don't know where Speaker Johnson got his patience from, but it must be God-given because his support throughout this process, working with us, never giving up, trying to restore regular order has been incredible and I think unparalleled in the history of the speakership, in my view. I want to thank the other members of our leadership, Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer, Conference Chair McClain. They all worked really hard to make sure that we could come together, work across the lines, give us the freedom and flexibility that we needed, but also provide the persuasion that was necessary, both within our own ranks and across the aisle. I want to thank especially the Cardinals and the ranking members of the subcommittee. The ranking member and I agree. We had tried to force decision-making down because we trust our Cardinals and ranking members. They know their subjects. They know one another. They work together. Without them, and they solved most of the issues that were before us, we wouldn't be here. And that model worked well because the people that we relied on, our chairman and our ranking members, were people that we know and trust, and frankly, that know one another and trust one another and work well together. I'm extraordinarily proud of this committee for what it did. I also particularly want to thank my friend, the ranking member, across the aisle. Now, we don't always agree. As a matter of fact, once our mutual friend and former colleague, Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, called us the odd couple. That may be true. We don't usually start in the same place, but we are here today able to fund the government, 76% of the government of the United States, because of the ranking member and because of her leadership and her hard work to find common ground. I admire her tremendously as a person. I appreciate her as a working partner. We also had working partners in the United States Senate. We didn't have Chairman Collins. We didn't have Ranking Member Patty Murray. We wouldn't be here either. Again, this is not just a bipartisan or a House agreement. This is a bicameral agreement. And those institutional lines are sometimes more difficult than the partisan lines to negotiate. We managed to do that. I'm proud of each and every one of my ranking partners, but particularly the ranking member of my committee, the Appropriations Committee in the House. So we've had a lot of folks that have worked hard, and we may have some disagreements in the coming days. Probably will. I'd be surprised if we don't. But I know if we work hard, we can work through them and get to a successful conclusion. My friend, for instance, mentioned body cameras. I couldn't agree more. It was something we added in the bill, but it was something she advocated for and championed. We agree on the need for additional training. There's lots we can find in common as we try to work through this, and I hope we're able to do that. But the important thing today, Mr. Speaker, is to finish the task. To take these bills, which represent the vast majority of things where we have found common ground and agreement in a process of give and take and good faith efforts and compromise and debate, and make sure that they pass and reach the president's desk so we do not put American federal workers and American soldiers and American public servants out of work. We let them do their job on behalf of the American people. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support what is genuinely a bicameral and bipartisan product, and one that the president has signed and urged, or will sign and has urged us to pass. And with that, Mr. Speaker, again, I urge passage of this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate is expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1032, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion by the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Gentleman, lady from
Speaker, I
Connecticut.
requested yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.